Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Live with Liz. I hope you're having a great week. Happy International Women's Day. That's a message that I find a little bit strange in all of this. There are so many things going on in the world. Having a happy day for women seems a little bit odd, especially if you didn't look at the theme this year where we're talking about breaking the bias. And I think that's important to take a step back and say, okay, you know, it was a good day to think about those things, but I guess I'll also take the spa day and the manicure too. Thanks very much. Is that a double standard? It's not. It's just who we are. Men and women are different. We know that. So law firms, why do we have the same expectations for everyone? This is part of the problem. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about promoting women in law firms and trying to reach gender equity in the face of ongoing challenges toward that goal. There are a lot of challenges that people describe to me over the years of working in the legal industry and with law firms about, finding women with the right background and women who can succeed and women who can be promoted. And a lot of onus is put on women to really perform in life more than their male counterparts. And then women leave and they say, okay, well, we don't have enough women. We look at where things start in law school. You see, there are actually in the United States more women graduating from law school than men now. There are more women going to law school, more women graduating. But throughout careers, women tend to take a step back and leave to have children or pursue other things or take care of life, take care of parents, take care of other business, the business of life, instead of recruiting more clients and doing the business development activities and having time to do relationship building. Oftentimes they get just sent to kind of be the worker bee while the men around them end up in those roles that allow them to advance, to grow their book of business, to, and then the advice that women get, you know, take the lead from the man, have some emotional intelligence, and, find some mentorship like a man would, and then, you'll be in the same place. It's not necessarily true. And then over time, throughout a woman's career, what happens is women leave and men get promoted while they're gone. And when they try and re-enter, it's even more of a challenge. And the younger women are coming up and the younger men are coming up. And ooh, it's a hard life. There are some things that I've learned throughout all of this. It's not the same in a corporate environment. Why can corporates do it in a corporate legal department, but law firms can't? So this expectation that corporations have for law firms to step up and make it a reality, you know, shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone because they do it if they can do it. And I shared an update yesterday from the International Trademark Association. They've been doing it for decades. They've got some really incredible equity numbers. But when it comes to the numbers in the US, sure, a lot of practicing attorneys are women. According to Statista, it's less than 40% at this point. But when you look at leadership roles and partnership positions, especially equity partnership positions, that percentage goes down and down and down. And then when you really take a look at who women are, because women are very different. You've got uh, racial, religious differences. You've got differences from cultural backgrounds and national origin and skill sets. Everyone is different. Men too. Men are different too from each other, obviously, as well as from women. And when you look at those differences even more, the people who are even more considered other or looked at differently or don't fit the mold or who are just lower in numbers, um, maybe feel isolated, don't have the same opportunities, maybe have different socioeconomic backgrounds, and it gets even more bleak for women of color, women with, um, you know, differences in gender identity and in abilities. All of these lend themselves, these factors make it obvious that there's an inclusive problem in law firms, which we know. But what do we do about it? I mean, I was at a conference a few years ago in Washington, D.C., and while there, a senior partner of a law firm, whom I respected very much, looked at me and said, "Why do you still need a women's breakfast? There are more women here than men. Do you really still need that?" And oh, so many things you want to answer and going through your brain. Better in that moment for me to just walk away and just, it's not worth it. Some people just won't get it. And I thought about it for a minute then and said, well, look around. Sure, there are a lot of women here and a lot of women with successful careers and doing different things. And they're very active. But how many women on this roster are actually partners in the firms that they're representing? How many women hold those leadership roles next to the men who are dominating those positions? How many women have led the organization here? And even though that particular person was not able to see and felt equality was good enough, um, it's pretty obvious to most people that this is a problem, that this is still an issue. So I sat down with a law firm a few years ago and they said, well, what do we do? How do we address this problem and make it fair? How can you possibly say to a man who has worked for years and years and years and grown his book of business and has performed higher at every metric we use that we're going to promote a woman who has less years of experience and a smaller book of business over him just to justify having a woman in that place? It's taken a long time for me to research and understand what some of this looks like. But when you talk to women and get some insight about one, how they're successful, shout out to Jamie Sternberg for this book behind me, Women in Law. Um, if you haven't picked up your copy, it's available on Amazon. And this is going to give you a lot of insight. I think this is maybe one of the first steps. Listen to women, figure out what's going on, understand or try to understand what the differences are and what makes people successful. And women can learn from each other too. So I've seen a lot of articles and commentary recently about how to emulate men to be successful, but that I don't find to be the answer. Um, there's a lot more out there. The American Bar Association has a study that is very interesting. It was published last year. I'm not sure if that was the first iteration or an update, but the study is called In Their Own Words, and it's experienced women lawyers explaining why they leave law firms in the profession. Understanding that will help address the situation, but there are some things that I think a lot of women can relate to, and we need each other. Why we still need that breakfast? We need each other. But there are some things that I think are difficult to come to terms with. The pay disparity. Why everyone says no, but it's equal pay for equal work. But when women have to take a step back, or women are expected to do different things or started from way back behind the men, then it's impossible to have that time for relationship building, that time to grow your book of business, and that leads to that pay disparity. That leads to naturally people working more hours or having more clients, especially when compensation is tied to it. That fosters that pay disparity. It encourages it, not necessarily intentionally, but that's why it exists. It happens. There are other things that are cited in that study from the ABA, like the lack of upward mobility, being passed over for a promotion. And there are takeaways from that and from understanding the success of women that I think can be really informative and help understand why I make some of the recommendations I do when it comes to law firms taking on these considerations to find some equity in their leadership. I know it's easy to say, well, you just need to have women in your partnership. And men are like, there aren't any, or there are no women with the qualifications, or women aren't willing to do the same things the men are. Well, that's where I say, hold on, stop for a second. I know women aren't willing to do the same things that men are necessarily all the time. Some women might be, some women are, but this is why women leave, open their own firms, and then are often very successful because people still want to work with them. The environment is different. There is upward mobility. They address the pay disparity. They figure it out at some of these places. But one of the things that regular law firms can do is understand that not everyone is the same. And this is the difference between equity and equality, right? We're not saying that men and women are the same. So instead of having the same expectations for each individual person to reach a promotion and say, well, you have to have 10 years in your books and you have to bring on so much revenue for us to consider you, or so many numbers of clients for us to consider you for promotion. Instead of doing it just across the board for everyone, and this is maybe a generational gap too, I think an expectation of the younger generation now, tailor those expectations to the people who are working there. You want to make sure that you have a customized advancement plan, a career track, a path for women and men that makes sense for their contributions and where they are. You can't expect every single person to perform the same way and say, oh, well, it's just business, because it's not just business anymore. And I think if there's anything the pandemic taught us, it's not just business anymore. It's life. People work 24 hours. Working from home certainly lent itself to some flexibility, some greater opportunities for women, especially. But also, the pandemic, in this, we saw women leaving the workforce in droves, millions of women leaving the workforce because they're the caretakers. And that is why, when you have this opportunity to really try and balance your numbers or create some equity in your firm, I recommend strongly looking at people individually and creating career paths that are tailored to those people, not to this general standard and say every single person is the same, because we're not the same. We all come from different places. Men and women are different. And it's okay to recognize that and to not have the same expectations for every single person. They sit there and they say, well, how can I take someone with a different, just because they're of a certain ethnicity or a certain skin color, and I want to promote them because I need them in leadership? Well, you definitely want these people in leadership. You want to have diverse leadership for all of the reasons we always discuss. You're more productive, you get more clients overall, people want to work with you, you get new perspective and can deliver better for your clients. Your clients expect that of you. You get chosen more for it. So yes, could it be difficult to make those decisions to promote someone who may not have the exact same background of the men you usually promote, or of the people who you usually promote, who are generally more men than women? It can make sense. And it's not necessarily just because of their background. It's that their whole experience and their journey has qualified them to be there. Now, if that is unsettling to you and you still can't do it, lateral hire people, steal someone from somewhere else and pay the market price. Why why can't you do that? You can, you just don't want to, or you're afraid to, or you just don't want to. That's I won't change everyone's minds about that. And it's not easy. It's not an easy thing for me to just say, oh, add a woman partner. I know that it's difficult. But we can look at the different paths that you have in place for the people you have, who want to be there. We can take a look and create a plan for you to find out what the market is doing and where you can be invested earlier on to make these things a reality and understand what the expectations are. You can make allowances for men and women so that later on you have an understanding of how people can advance and still live their lives and still be productive members of society and leave this old model. You see alternative legal service providers winning in this space. Um, if it's not, if your compensate, not always, but if your compensation is not tied to that book of business, if your compensation is considered differently, flexible time for everyone, changing societies, those sorts of considerations can really make a difference in whether or not you're able to have the leadership that's representative of society and productive for you and brings in the clients you really want to have, and helps you maintain those who are at risk of leaving when the women who are doing a lot of the legwork on their files leave and open their own firm. And that's happening, and it happens all over. It happens in Latin America, happens in the United States, it happens in Europe. And if it's not enough to make you see that there are ways to make this function. Not sure what will. But if you have questions about it and want to take a look and review, we will post some of the resources that I talked about, some of those studies in the comments so that people can access them and really get some of that insight. I encourage you to go out and understand a little bit of the women's perspective. Go to the women's breakfasts at these conferences. They're amazing. You get so much insight there. And let's have a chat about it. Hit me up. We'll have some coffee and we'll talk about what those differences look like in a respectful way. And hopefully we'll open some minds. And, you know. Thanks for joining me on Live with Liz. We do this on Wednesday mornings. It's usually a little coffee break. I've been neglecting mine. And if there's a topic you want us to cover, just let us know. Reach out solutions@firmforward.com or follow us at firmforward just about everywhere. And hopefully we'll see you next time on Live with Liz. Take care, everybody.